Hi, everyone. My name is Chris Johnston, and I'm a board member for the Friends of Ottawa National Wildlife Refuge. Just a reminder that we are a 501c3 nonprofit, which was established in 1997 to support Ohio's only national wildlife refuge complex with youth development, public use projects, and most recently, we're so excited, land acquisition and restoration. We're located along the southern shore of Lake Erie near Oak Harbor in some of the most critical wetland habitats in the world. If you're interested in learning more about us and what we do, I will eventually add a link to the chat. That link will point you in the right direction to become a member, make a tax-deductible donation to support our work, or even to shop our online nature store. Today, I am joined by Nancy Howell, who is not only an avid bird lover, but also holds a bachelor's in biology and a master's in zoology, which I find totally fascinating. She has worked as a naturalist with the Cleveland Metroparks and worked as an educator with the Cleveland Museum of Natural History. Nancy's interests include her chickens, working on bird surveys. She's an active board member with the Western Cuyahoga Audubon Society and is a bird volunteer at Black Swamp Bird Observatory. She's graciously joined us today to share her program, Migration Through Western Ohio, with us. Before we begin, just a quick reminder that you stay muted to minimize the background noise for our presenter. And Nancy, if you're ready at this time, I will go ahead and turn it over to you.
I am so ready. And first of all, I want to say good morning and welcome to everybody that has joined this morning, whether you're from Ohio, whether you're from another state, or I don't know if anybody's from another country, but welcome. And what I'm going to do is take you on a little trip, a little different. We're dealing with bird migration. We're going to take a look at the distant past of northwestern Ohio. We're going to take a look at, learn a little bit about migration itself. I hope this won't be too repetitive for most folks. And then we're going to take a few bird species, lots of them that'll dazzle the eye, and just look at how critical the wetlands, those Lake Erie marshes, and that Ottawa and the other McGee and some of the other organizations protect. So I just want to, again, just really, I'm thrilled to be here, thrilled that the Friends of Ottawa asked me to join. So I am going to get my screen up. I have to get my screen shared. Am I on screen share, by the way?
Not yet.
Oh. Okay.
You're getting there. Well, Nancy's doing that. Just so you know, everyone, I went ahead and dropped that link in the chat for you.
It's coming up. Of course, I had it pulled up and then it. And just let me know.
I will.
When it does come up. Right, it's on my screen.
Okay, so then you need to share with us through the Zoom meeting.
Right.
I think that's where it's stuck right now.
Yes, and I do not see the share button. Oh, there it is. Wait, no.
There you got it.
Move. Share screen. Host disabled participant screen sharing.
Okay, let me fix that. I'm not sure what's going on there.
Don't disable my screen share.
And it won't let me. Okay, hang on a second.
Oh, don't we love technology?
We do. It is not letting me enable your screen share. Hang on, let me see what I can do. Try now.
It still says disabled.
That.
Can you make her a co-host? If you make her a co-host, then she'll be able to share.
Thank you so much. It finally gave me the button. It was Zoom's being really weird today. You should have it. Hang on 1 second. You should have it in 1 second, Nancy.
Wait.
There you go. Thank you for the help. I think it's just being a weird little Zoom today.
No.
You should have it now. And here it comes. It's starting to come up.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone, for your patience. Gotta love Zoom.
Got to do our little dance through technology here. Wonderful. All righty. So I am a board member of Western Cuyahoga Audubon, and this is our logo. So Western Cuyahoga Audubon is located on the west side of Cleveland, but we accept anybody into the chapter, and we have a lot. So at the very end, you'll see our website address, so you can check it out at some time. So like I say, we're going to take a look at things a little differently. And for those in Ohio, for those out of Ohio, this is what Ohio looks like, by the way. For folks who do not live in Ohio, of course, you have the Ohio River making our southern border. You have Lake Erie as part of our northern border. But we're really going to focus on that area circled in red called the Great Black Swamp. Isn't that the most awesome name? I'll tell you, when I was in school and we were going through Ohio history, I think it's called social studies now, we learned about the Great Black Swamp. And I always wanted to, because I think it's just awesome to just know what in the world the Great Black Swamp was all about. So basically what happened is Ohio was covered by glaciers at least 3 times, the last time about 10,000 years ago. So this is a photograph I took of the glacier 10,000 years ago in Ohio. That's a joke, okay? So the glaciers were retreating, and as those glaciers moved over the land, it scraped and just scratched and actually dug out what is now Lake Erie and most of our other Great Lakes. And with the rocks being a little softer in the western part of Ohio, that scraped a little bit flatter land. And that is what set the stage for what is in that Great Black Swamp area right now. So let me go back. All right, so the Great Black Swamp will reach all the way from these Lake Erie marshes, and it actually extended into Indiana, all right, with the Maumee River and some of its tributaries flowing into the lake, all right? So this is a really, really flat area of land. So thank you, glaciers, for what you've created. And as you look at this map, again, I'll bet you notice something. I'll bet you notice that area that I had in red on the previous map and that I circled here, the colors are mostly blue, all right, blues, and that means wave, planed ground moraine. Ooh, what does that mean? Well, that means that this was all ground up, and this was actually Lake Erie overflowing itself, all right? So when all that water melted from the glaciers, the waters actually spilled over into all this area that was flattened by the glaciers, again, even into Indiana. But as those glaciers retreated or melted, the debris that was caught in all that ice, the sand, the rocks, the pebbles, the ground up stuff that made muds and silts were dropped out, all right? So as the glaciers melting back, it's leaving behind things like these green bands here, moraines they're called. And then there were swales, areas of water in between where bands of debris. And you can see that really, let's just go a little south of this red circle. Whoops, back up, no. Right, take a look at some of these green bands here. You can actually see when the glaciers were retreating, it left a strip there, retreated, left a strip there and there. And so you could see how in this higher ground, it just simply left those different rocks and sands and stuff. But here in that flattened part of Ohio, This is called the Lake Plain. This is the Great Black Swamp. Over 1 million acres of a mosaic of wetlands, grassy plains, forests that were growing on some of the higher ground. So again, it was a real mosaic, a real diverse area. And you're probably thinking, well, what does this have to do with migration? Well, as those glaciers were melting, remember the birds that were coming up from the south, they had already begun their migration patterns. But this is 8, 9, almost 10,000 years ago. And it's becoming hardwired into their DNA that, yep, these are areas that we're going to be stopping and resting before we get into our further northern area. So this Great Black Swamp area is really crucial to that migratory initiation, all right? So what did it look like when the glaciers did finally retreat? Did it look like the prairie pothole region? So this is places like North and South Dakota or up into Canada, where you have, again, wetlands, where you have some grasslands, where you may have some forested areas. And you see there's some humps and lumps and bumps and things that might be a little drier and then a little wetter air. So did it look like that? Who knows? Did it look like the Everglades, where it was a little bit more heavily forested and then pockmarked with wetlands and wet areas? Possibly. How about a combination of both? But what really, that Great Black Swamp was really actually it was an ecosystem of its own. Because again, you had water flowing, very similar to the Everglades. You had water pooled, like the prairie pothole areas. You had areas that were, again, more heavily forested. You had areas that were scrub. You had the main water drainage here, the Maumee River, and then some of the tributaries. So again, Great Black Swamp. And again, remember, this is a political boundary right here. Nature does not know political boundaries. Nature follows natural boundaries, whether it's plant life or animal life. So beautiful, beautiful Great Black Swamp. Well, a lot of that Great Black Swamp does not exist any longer because as settlers moved in, of course, the land was there to be tamed. Timbering was important if you could get in because there were lots of oak trees. For those who live, again, along the Lake Erie shores, Oak Harbor was probably one of the major areas that oak and timber was shipped out. Oaks and so forestry was important, but also getting rid of that water, getting rid of the standing water so that crops could be grown. People didn't like this swampy area. It was full of mosquitoes, malaria. There were just reports in journals of just being just kind of a horrible area. So once people did figure out how to drain that area, get rid of the forests, even get rid of the wildlife, they could become agricultural. And much of this land is now agricultural. First of all, it's flat. It's easy to grow crops, corn and soybeans primarily, and it's just very rich soil. All right, so again, we're going to really focus on this Great Black Swamp area, but where the star is, we are going to make the Lake Erie Marshes Ottawa Refuge, National Wildlife Refuge, the star of our show. All right. So it's really a wonderful area. I don't know how many of you have visited the area. If you're thinking about visiting, migration is starting to move in as far as the songbirds, but waterfowl move through a little earlier. Raptors will be moving through in a little bit as well. The Friends of the Ottawa National Wildlife Refuge, their Friends website has a wonderful resource. It takes migration, and it takes birds you might see month by month. So I took a look at that and I'm like, oh, this is really useful. So let's say I visited the area in January. Not a whole lot of migration going on, but the information they present says, well, you're likely to see eagles and maybe some waterfowl and some of the residents, some of the birds that are there. But you may see a snowy owl. You may see the northern harrier and rough-legged hawks in some of those areas. As you move through the months, April, of course, you're starting to see the passerines, some of the songbirds come in. Of course, May is really the high point for a lot of our passerines moving through fall. Through the summer, you have a lot of nesting going on. Shorebirds are another important group of birds using the area. So really take a look at that Friends of the Ottawa National Wildlife Refuge website and check out that list if you are thinking about visiting the area. All right, so we're coming into that area, and I liked this particular quote. Now, this came from a Ducks Unlimited publication, just a recent publication that came in a couple days ago, and this classifies the marshes along the lake. It says, for many wildlife, the coastline, this is called the Great Lakes coastline, supports some of the richest wetland complexes in North America. Marshes, fens, bogs, freshwater estuaries, dune and swale mosaics, and lake plain prairie. Just as I mentioned with the glaciers, as those glaciers retreated, you had all these different mosaic of habitats that were there. So water levels rise and fall to build rich interwoven habitats. It's home sweet home and a much needed migratory stopover for large numbers of diving ducks, dabbling ducks, and that follow the Atlantic and Mississippi flyway, as well as for upland game species such as rails and Wilson's snipe. We have to remember that Ducks Unlimited is all about wetlands. And we want to make sure that I'm going to be adding things that will be using some of the shrub scrub areas, some of the forested areas, so some of the other birds. But I just thought that was really important to mention this mosaic of habitats that were produced and are still there today because of the wildlife refuges, because of the management going on, so that it allows these migrants to rest, refuel, and possibly nest. It just depends on what species. All right, so what is migration? Migration is seasonal, okay? So from breeding to wintering habitats. It's predictable. So we say, yep, the waterfowl are going to be coming through in late February, early March. The warblers are going to be coming in late April, early May. And generally migration is repeated 2 times a year, okay, spring and fall. Well, and then maybe you know this, but why do birds migrate? I mean, you would think that birds down in Central or South America would be like, this is lovely down here. But for as far as fall migration, the habitats become very poor in insects as fall and winter come in. So a lot of the insectivores, they just have to move out. It's not necessarily the cold, it's the food supply. And migration is hardwired into the bird's genes over the course of thousands of years. And of course, as I mentioned, as the glaciers retreated and vegetation grew in, the birds, again, gradually moving northward. And northward migration results in higher breeding success compared with tropical and wintering areas. And you might say, well, why? Well, you got competition with the residents in the tropics. You have a lot of predators in the tropics, whether it's insects or monkeys or other birds. There's a lot of mortality of tropical nesting birds. So there's abundant food as the birds are moving further north, longer day length, and like I say, fewer predators. Weather is important with bird migration. You have birds that migrate during the day, diurnal birds, and you have nighttime migrants, nocturnal birds. Diurnal birds, the birds that migrate during the day, tend to use thermals. So the warm, rising air that hawks, vultures, eagles, things like that will ride, and really it tends to save energy. Some other diurnal migrants include things like swallows and flycatchers and swifts, but they do not soar quite as much. They're flapping, they're more of a flapping flight, but they can get more energy because they're continually feeding along the way. And then, of course, most songbirds, most smaller birds tend to have flapping flight, and is generally used by nocturnal birds, the warblers and thrushes, vireos, kinglets, woodcocks, sparrows. Tends to use more energy, but again, those birds have built up fat. And any migratory stopover, like the refuges, these birds will drop in, they will eat. It's called hyperphagy. They will feed, build up fat, and then utilize that fat supply for that flapping flight. Winds are important. You have winds that from the south that will help move birds northward, a tailwind. For fall migration, you have winds from the north or northwest, again, providing tailwinds, helping the birds move south and southeasterly. I think some of you probably have been riding a bicycle and maybe have had the wind to your back and you're like, whoa, this is really easy. Or if you're riding into the wind, you're like, wow, this is really tough cycling. Or maybe you have an umbrella, you're carrying an umbrella and the wind is just pushing you along if it's from the back, but it's really tough to manage that umbrella if the winds are coming to you from your face. Pay attention to weather fronts, which are the dividing line between warm and cold air. So warm fronts moving in will bring in birds, especially from the south, and we're looking at that right now. Cold fronts bring in cool air. That may bring birds in a little bit from the north when you're, especially in the fall. So do pay attention to weather fronts. And pressure systems. I know this is like a whole weather show here. Areas of swirling air. And depending on which side of the front you're on, high pressure systems with the warm front on the back side of the warm front brings in northbound spring migrants. So watch for those types of things. Low pressure systems, not such good weather. And if you don't want to fuss with all this, check out this HTTPS Birdcast info. This is an awesome site. And you can see, I took a look at this on the night of April 13th. And what this is, and I'll go back to that site, or maybe somebody can put it in the chat. So if I had a private jet and I really wanted to check out the birds, where would I head this for the next day? Well, look at where the migration has started and is fairly good in intensity. It's about medium to almost high. So I might travel to the coast of Texas, Louisiana, maybe through Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, So here migration is really starting. Now, I'm not going to look for so much here, but you know, we got a few things happening in Ohio. All right. So birdcast, I'm going to go back to that. Again, birdcast.info, just a really, really, really simple site to remember. And this is real time. You can check it now, you could check it in an hour, and you will see maybe some differences. Check it in 2 days, you'll definitely see some differences as migration picks up. So this is wonderful.
Nancy?
Yes.
We have a couple questions in the chat. I don't know
Okay.
if you want to address them before we move on, and
All
I'll
right, that
correct
would be fine.
my website because I typed it incorrectly. The first question we have is, what happens to insects that cause birds to migrate?
What happens to insects?
That cause birds to migrate.
Well, it's with the insects become more abundant, right? So as things are warming up, insects become more abundant. Things like caterpillars feeding on leaves. So here in the southern part of the U.S., things are leafing out more, so the insects become more abundant. Flying insects become more abundant. So that is what is attracting those. Again, it's hardwired into their genes to move up. So hopefully they're finding the insects that they need.
Okay, great. We have a couple more questions if you want to move forward with those. The next one is, please discuss how the Western Basin impacts the rest of Lake Erie.
I'm not a geologist, but that Western Basin is the shallowest part of Lake Erie. And it will freeze quicker. It will thaw a little quicker as well. And it does produce, it is Lake Erie's natural estuary-like thing where you have fish that breed and insects that breed. So those shallow waters in that Western Basin really provide a lot of food for plant vegetation eaters, you know, because there's aquatic vegetation, there's insects and fish larvae and stuff like that. So the rest of Lake Erie can influence our weather conditions, especially along, let's say, from about Lorain, Cleveland, and the eastern part of Ohio. I'm not quite as familiar with how it might affect the western part, like Sandusky and Port Clinton, places like that.
Okay, thank you. And one final question that we have for now that's in the chat. Why do birds come back to the northern states in the spring? Why don't they just stay in the warmer states year round?
Warmer states, or like in further south?
It says warmer states, but I'm thinking it could also mean just where it's warmer in general.
Right, yeah, exactly. Well, again, as I listed, let me see if I can go back to, all right, so northward migrations, higher breeding success. And remember, migration is hardwired into the bird's genes. The birds don't say, gosh, I think it's warmer up there. Ah, yeah, let's go up there. The birds are going to be coming no matter what. And they do have a higher breeding success because they do not have to compete with the resident birds in the tropical areas. There are fewer predators, again, in this northern, or these states is further north, or up into Canada for that matter, because a lot of these migrants go up into the boreal forest or even into the Arctic tundra to nest. The longer day length. Remember, down in the tropics, things are about the same every day. 12 hours of daylight, 12 hours of darkness. Here, you go up into, you probably already recognize that our days are getting longer. You can have 15 hours of daylight here in Ohio or more. So you have better foraging, you have food, and less competition.
Great, thank you so much. That was the last of the questions.
Yeah, I'm hoping that was helpful for the questions that were asked.
And if it's not, please just drop a clarifier in the chat and we'll catch it up in another spot.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, here's something that many of you may see in places, maybe as you visit or you're going through a book or something, is what are called the flyways. And the flyway system was really created for waterfowl, more aquatic birds, wetland birds, rails, shorebirds, things like that, where they're following major waterways like the Atlantic coast, the Mississippi River area, the central area, which was the prairie pothole region, and then the Pacific Flyway. This does not really fit well with other migratory birds, the passerines, the cuckoos, the woodpeckers, things like that. So really, this is more for the wetland aquatic birds, ducks, shorebirds, rails, things like that. All right, so let's visit some of these migratory species and that utilize the Lake Erie marshes. So you could have a marshland that is cattails, you can have some deeper pools, you can have some forested areas, and just let's just take a nice tour of some of the different species. All right, so tundra swan, they're lovely, and notice on the map where their breeding area is. Whoa, I mean, you are talking about tundra. That's a good name for them. So they're way up north. The yellow, and these are, this is Cornell Lab of Ornithology maps. The yellow is their migratory route, with the Great Lakes being an important area, and of course the Lake Erie marshes. And they're heading towards Chesapeake Bay and the coastline of North Carolina. So this is where they're going to be wintering, at least on the East Coast. You notice the West Coast has some different areas. Depending on the weather and things warming up, yes, we do have some tundra swans that are hanging here on the Lake Erie marshes. But most of the population tends to go to that East Coast. And so this is a critical area for them to refuel, to rest, and for us to enjoy while we're out there. Of course, they don't know that. I tossed in blue-winged teal. It's one of the smaller waterfowl that pass through the area. It happens to be one of my favorite waterfowl. I know it's not the showiest duck, but I had a really wonderful experience when I was younger, having a flock of blue-winged teal fly in front of me. And as they banked, all that powdery blue that you see on their wing just shone, and it was just like, oh, magic. So that's one of my favorites. And you can see they breed in quite an extensive area, including the Western Basin and parts of Ohio. And then when they're not breeding, they're heading down into places like Florida and Mexico and the southern states. So they don't travel too far, but they are, again, one of my faves. But they still have to feed, they still have to rest. And again, these areas are important for breeding too. And of course, remember that quote that I had from Ducks Unlimited talking about the dabbling and diving ducks. So I just thought I'd dazzle your eye a little bit with some of the divers, things like the redhead and the lesser scaup. We've got pintail, which is a dabbling duck. Of course, lots of folks love the wood duck, beautiful. In the center here, we have the northern shoveler. Here's an American goldeneye courting a female, throwing his head back, just beautiful. American widgeon. And then down below, mallard, redhead, canvasback. So there's a nice variety of waterfowl that utilize these marshes, both dabblers and divers. Again, as I mentioned, and as that quote mentioned, that the rails are another important bird that utilize these marsh regions. As you can see, the Virginia rail, which is sometimes a really difficult bird to find because not only are they thin as a rail and can slip through the vegetation easily, but they can skulk a little bit, but then sometimes, like the photo, the birds just stand right out there. So, yep, they'll breed in these marshy regions, migrate through, and then just head to Mexico, the southern coast of the United States, and Florida, going into Mexico as well too. They're really a fun bird to find. All right, shorebirds. Well, the Western Hemisphere Shorebird Reserve Network also really mentions the Lake Erie Marsh region. And as I mentioned earlier, right now the marshes are man-made dikes and protects the vegetation from high lake levels. They can also draw down water in places like the Ottawa Refuge as well as McGee. So again, manipulating those water levels as the wetlands did long ago before humans began to manipulate them. The lake levels would come up and go down. There'd be wetter areas, there'd be droughty areas or drier areas. But as we're able to manipulate the water levels, these become important for the variety of shorebirds. 38 species of shorebirds reported by Western Hemisphere Shorebird Reserve Network. And they can be anywhere from the beaches, like ruddy turnstones and piping plover, dry mud flats, moist mud flats, shallow water, deep water. So let's take a look at a few of these shorebirds that, again, can dazzle the eye when they're here. So ruddy turnstones on the beach, moving the pebbles and rocks and looking for little things, as their name implies, turnstones, turning over some of the zebra mussels too that have washed ashore. The piping plover, little tiny thing. Some of the drier areas, buff-breasted sandpiper and black-bellied plover. Again, they're feeding, they're fattening up, because a lot of these shorebirds are heading to the tundra. And then here's a nice trio. You have a pectoral sandpiper. Looks as though this middle taller one is a yellow legs. And my shorebirding is not as good, but this kind of sort of looks like a Western sandpiper with that kind of droopy curved down beak. If anybody there is a shorebird expert, please correct my ID. Yellow legs in a little deeper water. Same thing with the dunlin, the dowitchers, probing like little sewing machines in the mud. And then deeper water, things like American avocet and the godwit. Beautiful, beautiful. All right. So we took a look at a lot of water birds. Here's a bird that utilizes water for finding its food, the osprey, and many of them are moving through right now. What's amazing about osprey, first of all, they nest here and they, of course, eat an awful lot of fish. But when osprey hatch and nest and hatch out their young, the young birds of the year are kind of left by the adults. The adults migrate a little earlier than the young. The young are like, whoa, and then they have to find their way all the way down to Central or South America, sometimes as far as Venezuela. Now, there are some year-round populations, of course, in the southern states, but any of these birds that are up here breeding around the Great Lakes or up into Canada, they're going to head down through Central South America and into South America. But those young birds will spend over a year down in South America and then will head back to their place where they hatched after being down in South America for a year. I mean, think about it. I, Luke, put my keys down and I can't remember where I put them down 10 minutes ago. But these birds, these young birds migrating for the first time, head down to South America, stay there for a year, and then head back up and remember where they were hatched. But all the while, they are dependent on fish for food, whether they're getting it out of the Mississippi River, the Atlantic Ocean, the Gulf, or along the shorelines of South America. Fabulous birds. Now, broad-winged hawks are beginning to come in. Remember, hawks are one of the diurnal migrants. They utilize the thermals, the warm thermals, to help them move up through the area. And again, they too spend their winters down either in Central or South America. They will nest in this kind of this corally pink color. But once they hit the Great Lakes, and we're going to talk about Lake Erie, they're going to be like, no, I don't think I'm going across that lake. First of all, those thermals do not form as well over bodies of water. So any of the raptors, whether it's broad-winged hawk, rough-legged hawk, red-tailed hawks, any of those hawks, they will actually skirt the lake and then go through places like Michigan and follow the land masses where the thermals are rising. So again, along the lakes can be very, very good for watching raptors and of course, providing food in those refuge areas. A couple more of those diurnal, the daytime birds, things like swifts and swallows. Please take a look at this map. Do you see where the birds winter? Nope. They must go underwater. They must go somewhere else, right? No, they head down to South America. So chimney swifts, not even in Central America, not in North America. They're down in South America. And boy, these are aerial insectivores. These are birds that feed on the wing. They spend their time on the wing. They need the energy of those insects, things like mayflies and midges and dragonflies, the things that those wetlands can provide. So these aerial insectivores are going to be migrating throughout the day and feeding, and that also includes things like the swallows, like purple martins. Same thing. They'll nest here in North America. They'll migrate through Mexico, but boom, they are down in South America for the winter time. So all of these swallows, barn swallow, tree swallow, northern rough-winged swallow, and bank swallow, along with others, again, are going to be moving during the day, feeding, needing those marshy areas, and resting in the marshes as well, too. Purple martins will roost by the thousands in certain marsh regions. And again, very, very important on fall migration. Let's not forget the flycatchers. They too are aerial insectivores, eating things a little differently. They're not on the wing constantly or more constantly like the swallows and swifts, but things like the phoebe. This one probably a least flycatcher, potentially, the great crested flycatcher, and the eastern kingbird. They tend to be on branches, go out, dart out, catch insects, and then fly back. But again, really highly dependent on insects, whether they catch them in midair, or they can do a little bit of gleaning of insects from leaves and branches. So not quite as dependent on the aerial insects, but still very important insect eaters. Recall that the marshes provided some upland habitats too. I know we talked a lot about water, but a couple of trees that are very important to migratory birds are oaks And these little things dangling down, and I don't know how much you know about oak trees, these are the male flowers. That little arrow is pointing to the female flower, all right? And these male flowers is what a lot of the small songbirds will glean, and even the small leaves too. You can see how tiny those leaves are. This is where the tiny little caterpillars have hatched and are beginning to feed. These leaves don't have some of the tannins and toxins in them that the plants will develop. So the caterpillars are munching on these newly sprouted leaves. And this is where the songbirds will forage. Watch them. Same thing with willows. Willows are very important. The catkin of the willow, those new little leaves, very important for providing the carbs and the fats and the proteins that those birds need. All right, so things like the yellow-throated vireo. You know, they're down in Central and South America for the winter, and then head up to our beautiful area in the spring and summer. Ah, the thrushes, beautiful. Again, Central America to North America. These forests are so important for these birds finding food. Sparrows, again, these are all birds that are migrating at night and then come down during the day to rest, refuel, and just, you know, bulk it up, get that fat on. Lincoln sparrow is one of my favorites. Well, looks like they don't head too far south, but check out where they do breed. They head up to Canada and the mountain states to breed. And you know, here is one of the most overlooked birds, the rusty blackbird, which are really, their numbers are plummeting, and nobody really knows the reason why. They are a bird of concern. Rusty blackbirds, they're just a beautiful blackbird. They have the yellow, lightish color eye, a male and a female here, utilizing a lot of forested wetlands. So again, these marshes around the lake are very important. You can see they can be here in the winter, but look at where these birds go to breed. They go up to that boreal forest, the tundra area. So what's causing their decline in numbers? Is it their breeding area? Is it the migration route? Is it their non-breeding or wintering area? Again, I don't think anybody has figured that out. It could be a combination of all three. But look for rusty blackbirds, one of my faves.
Nancy?
Yes.
I just want to jump in really quick and remind folks that we're about 10 minutes out. I know we're going to run a little over because we had a few technical issues, but this would be a good time to drop any additional questions in the chat.
Yes, and we'll be moving through some of these because I just wanted to dazzle everybody's eyes, because I know this is what people head to the Ottawa and some of the Lake Erie marshes for, to walk through the woods, to walk through the brushy areas and find the wood warblers. Some will nest in Ohio or in the states in which you live, but many of them head up to Canada or further north, but they need the resources for bulking up, for getting that fat, whether it's the palm warbler feeding on or near the ground, the black-throated green warbler, bay-breasted warbler. Oh my goodness, so many yellow warblers, love them. And I've been debating on water thrush on this one. Looks like Louisiana, but could be, you know, it just depends on how you look at it angled in the slide. We're getting another ground feeder. Ooh, black and white warbler feeding on the insects that may be clinging to trees or in between the little crevices of bark. The magnolia warbler, Tennessee warbler, and American redstart, all again just moving about, eating, feeding, and bringing us enjoyment. Wilson's warbler, black-throated blue warbler, the Nashville, Blackburnian warbler, Cape May warbler. Oh, goodness gracious, we just can't wait till they're here. But I'm showing you most of these birds in their spring plumage. Try this in the fall. The birds, the warblers tend not to use those Lake Erie marshes quite as extensively in the fall, but they still will move through. blackpoll warbler in the spring, blackpoll warbler in the fall. How about that? Boy. Northern parula, chestnut-sided warbler, mourning warbler, and I love this little guy, the prothonotary warbler. And I think one of the things that people do realize, especially with the blackpoll warbler, is its southward migration. Again, nesting up in Canada, but look at how crucial this Ohio region, especially the Lake Erie marshes, these birds coming through this area, stopping along the coastline, and then heading out over the Atlantic Ocean and taking a southerly route. So these birds have got to really pack on the fat so that they can take that trans-ocean flight from the coastline of the Carolinas, Virginia, Georgia, and head down to South America without stopping. They are doing this at night. Flapping flight. Amazing. Just absolutely amazing. Beautiful rose-breasted grosbeaks. Again, non-breeding area, breeding area. Indigo bunting, same thing. So again, just birds that we love to see in the spring, in the fall. So important to get out with a group. So these are a couple photos of our Western Cuyahoga folks that are out and about. And whether they're with scopes or their binoculars, they like to visit places like Ottawa and the Lake Erie marshes. Or don't forget, visit your park or neighborhood green space. All that stuff is out there. You just have to look for it. And I do want to thank everybody again for Friends of the Ottawa National Wildlife Refuge for allowing me to present this. The participants who joined me today, Tom Fishburne and his wonderful photographs, as well as the Cornell Lab for the maps, longtime birders, new birders, and of course the birds themselves. So there's our Western Cuyahoga Audubon website. Please take a look at it. We've got lots going on. So thank you again. And I hope to answer a few additional questions.
Thank you so much, Nancy. At this time, I'm looking at the chat and I'm checking for questions. I'm not sure if there are any other folks who have questions. Give me 1 second to scroll through it. Lots of positive comments. Here we go. Okay, let me get back to where the questions start. Okay. Right. How long is the typical breeding period?
It depends on the species. You know, you may have robins in your yard that will start nesting now and maybe have 2 or 3 broods throughout the summer. Same thing with mourning doves. Yellow warblers, 1 brood. That's it. They come in, they nest, and then they're finished. They're heading out of Ohio by late August into early September. Similarly, the shorebirds nesting up in the tundra. Hopefully they're able to pull off a brood by early August. Some of the shorebirds are already moving down towards the wetlands around Lake Erie. So again, it just depends on the species.
Great, thank you. I'm checking the chat. A lot of people who are coming from out of state. I see somebody from Colorado, somebody from Minnesota that want to come over here and check things out. So that is absolutely awesome.
You know, that Western Basin area around McGee and Ottawa is called the warbler capital of the world in the spring, because it is just jam-packed with warblers.
Perfect, perfect. I have to say, Nancy, this has been incredibly informative, and I cannot thank you enough for sharing your knowledge, your passion, and your desire to share what you know is just amazing. I did go ahead and put, for all those that are still with us, I went ahead and put in the chat several links. I put in some that Nancy had on her slides. I was really quick to look those up for you. And then the other one that I stuck on, in case you enjoyed this program and you really wanted to find out some of the other speakers that we have, is I went ahead and stuck in the link for our program calendar, which is available at www.friendsofottawanwr.org/seek refuge days, but it's in the chat, so don't worry about it. I'm scrolling through, still making sure, nothing new coming up there. And then the last chat that I'm going to go ahead and put into the last link, I should say, that I'm going to go ahead and put into the chat is one for you to go ahead and fill out our survey. If you take the time to fill out our survey, then you will have access to a special coupon code from the Rookery Nature Store, which is just an amazing, amazing little store. It has quite a few reference books and things of that nature. So I'm going to drop that in while I'm checking the chat one more time. And as if there's anybody who'd like to come off of mute and ask a question, please
that
feel
would be
free.
fine too.
Sometimes I forget to mention that. And also just a reminder that you will have access to a recording of this particular, actually of any of the presentations. So you'll have the ability to watch this again at your leisure.
I have a question.
Sure.
Nancy, do you have an all-time favorite bird?
Well, I'm going to take a quote from somebody. It's the bird that I am looking at the moment.
I love that.
That is a cop-out in a way. No, I don't have an ultimate favorite bird. I mean, I love my chickens. You know, I love the turkeys that walk in the yard. I love, it's whatever I'm looking at the time. And here's one of the things too. Sometimes people say, oh, it's just a house sparrow. Oh, it's just an American robin. But if you take the time to look at them, I love looking at robins in the winter that are here in Ohio. They tend to be Canadian birds that have come down. They are just beautiful. Their plumage is bright, and their feathers are perfect because they've molted, and they're just like, I could look at robins all winter long. And then, of course, once spring starts here in Ohio, then we get robins all over, and I tend to, I'm still going to look at them. So it's whatever I'm looking at the moment.
Perfect. We did have another question pop up in the chat. I'm seeing a lot more cardinals, males and females alike. Reason why?
I was just going to answer that by writing, but it's just easier for me to mention. I was going to say, maybe the habitat around you has changed, more shrubs. Cardinals like a shrubby area. So perhaps things have grown up a little bit more. I don't know if there's more people feeding birds in the area, but if you have more cardinals, always good. Yeah, it's nice to have cardinals. So again, think habitat. Cardinals are not necessarily a thick forest bird. They like neighborhoods. They like shrubby areas. So neighborhoods that have bushes and shrubs and things. And perhaps there's fewer predators. People are keeping their kitty cats confined and so forth. So, yeah.
Nancy, do you think there'd be any impact on migration because of the 17-year cicada hatching this year? Would it slow down migration or no impact?
The cicadas tend to be coming out. Where are you speaking from? Are you from Ohio?
Southeastern Michigan.
Southeastern Michigan. All right. The brood of cicadas coming out is not going to be in our area. It's more towards Washington, D.C., Virginia, maybe southeastern Ohio. I didn't think it was going to be that brood that comes this far north. The cicadas tend to come out a little bit later than migration. It's going to allow birds that maybe are here early to feed and bulk up. But of course the aerial insectivores, if the cicadas are flying, they'll be able to catch them and consume them. It's not going to cause a shift in migration though. All right, so the birds aren't going to say, oh, let's head over here because the cicadas are hatching. These cicadas will provide again, more nutrients for broods that are being raised by birds in that area. So the cardinals and the blue jays and even the raptors, things like a broad-winged hawk, they'll love those cicadas and again, provide good food for their young.
Thank you.
Nancy, I have another question. Last year, there was a limpkin that was famous at the Ottawa National Wildlife Area that was supposed to be just passing through, but ended up staying through most of the winter. Do you think that bird made it? Was he just lost?
Possibly lost. I don't know if it made it. I didn't hear anything otherwise. I know I went to look for it 3 times and were skunked all 3 times. So never go out with me when I chase, because I always get skunked. But more than likely it did not survive if it hung throughout the winter, because things froze up and the bird needs, again, open waters. Maybe you heard about the brown booby that was around the Akron area. And again, it hung around for a while. There was plenty of food because they're fish eaters, and it did not survive. So often birds that really don't belong in the area, maybe something's wrong with them. They have a heavy parasite load. Something is amiss, and many of them do not survive.
I'm not seeing anything in the chat. Are you,
All right,
Nancy?
yeah,
I
me
feel like
either.
you're looking also.
Yep, I'm looking, but again, I just want to thank everybody for hanging with me, and I hope everybody has a great time today. Maybe taking a look at some of the other presentations, whether it's today or throughout the rest of the month. And please get out there and enjoy the birds and nature in general.
Great, thank you. It looks like folks are kind of logging off. So at this time, I'll go ahead and end the meeting. And I hope everybody has a wonderful day. It's been great working with you, Nancy.